The spotlight blazes down on a 20-year-old girl with platinum blonde hair, her voice soaring through octaves that seem to defy human limits. It's 1999, and Christina Aguilera is unleashing Genie in a Bottle upon the world, her debut single climbing charts with the ferocity of a wildfire. But behind those crystalline blue eyes lies a story far more complex than the bubblegum pop princess the world is about to embrace. This is the tale of a voice that would become synonymous with power, rebellion, and an uncompromising artistic vision that would both elevate and torment its owner. In the sweltering heat of Staten Island, New York, on December 18, 1980, Christina Maria Aguilera drew her first breath into a world already fractured by tension. Her father, Fausto Xavier Aguilera, was an army sergeant whose Puerto Rican heritage carried both pride and pain. Her mother, Shelley Lorraine, was an Irish-American woman whose dreams of performing had been quietly folded away like old sheet music. The Aguilera household was a battleground where love and violence danced a dangerous waltz. "My father was very dominating, very scary," Christina would later confide to Rolling Stone magazine, her voice carrying the weight of childhood memories that never quite fade. The family moved frequently, following military assignments from base to base, but no amount of distance could outrun the storm brewing within their home. Fausto's temper was legendary among neighbors, his rage erupting without warning like summer thunder. Young Christina learned to read the weather patterns of her father's moods, retreating with her younger sister Rachel and brother Michael into the sanctuary of music whenever the barometric pressure dropped. It was in these moments of terror that Christina discovered her voice could be both shield and sword. At age 6, she would sing herself to sleep, her trembling soprano transforming fear into something beautiful. Her mother, Shelley, recognized the gift immediately. Christina had this voice that could stop traffic, Shelley recalled years later. Even as a little girl, she could hit notes that made grown adults weep. When Christina was 7, Shelley made the courageous decision that would reshape their lives forever. She packed their belongings in the dead of night and fled with her 3 children to her mother's house in Pennsylvania, leaving behind the man whose love had curdled into cruelty. The divorce was messy and painful, but it liberated Christina's voice from the silence that fear had imposed. In the small town of Wexford, Pennsylvania, Christina blossomed like a flower finally given sunlight. She devoured every musical influence she could find, from Whitney Houston's soaring ballads to Etta James's sultry blues. Her grandmother's record collection became her university, and the bathroom mirror her first audience. "I would lock myself in there for hours," Christina remembered, pretending I was performing at Madison Square Garden. At 10 years old, Christina auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club, that launching pad for future superstars. Her rendition of Whitney Houston's I Have Nothing left the Disney executives speechless, but they deemed her too young for the show. Rejection, she learned early, was just another note to master. 2 years later, she tried again, and this time her voice had matured into something undeniable. She joined the cast alongside future icons Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, and Ryan Gosling, though none of them could have predicted the seismic impact they would each have on popular culture. Christina was always the most talented one in the room, remembered Tony Luca, a fellow Mouseketeer, but she was also the most driven. While the rest of us were playing video games, she was in the corner, working on her vocals, pushing herself to hit notes that seemed impossible. When the show ended in 1994, Christina found herself in that peculiar purgatory that haunts child performers, too old for Disney, but too young for the music industry's brutal machinery. She spent her teenage years performing at local venues, her voice growing stronger and more distinctive with each performance. The girl who had once cowered from her father's rage was transforming into a young woman who commanded attention with every breath she took. The breakthrough came through an unlikely channel. In 1998, Disney was searching for someone to record Reflection for the animated film Mulan. They needed a voice that could convey both vulnerability and strength, a singer who could capture the essence of a young woman discovering her true self. Christina's demo tape landed on the right desk at exactly the right moment, and her ethereal interpretation of the song became her golden ticket to stardom. Ron Fair, the AR executive who discovered her, was struck by something beyond mere technical ability. Christina didn't just sing the song, he recalled. She inhabited it. She understood that music wasn't just about hitting the right notes. It was about telling stories that mattered. Within months, she was signed to RCA Records, and the machinery of pop stardom began to churn around her. Genie in a Bottle erupted onto radio waves in the summer of 1999 like a sonic earthquake. The song's sultry promise wrapped in an innocent melody created a perfect storm of commercial appeal and artistic intrigue. MTV played the video in heavy rotation, showcasing Christina's transformation from Disney darling to pop provocateur. Her debut album sold over 14 million copies worldwide, establishing her as a force to be reckoned with in the increasingly crowded landscape of late 90s pop music. But success came with a price that few outside the industry could understand. Christina found herself trapped in a carefully constructed image, her management team and record label intent on marketing her as a wholesome pop princess to compete with the emerging Britney Spears phenomenon. They wanted me to be this perfect little blonde robot, she later revealed in interviews, but that was never who I was inside. The pressure intensified when she began dating dancer Jorge Santos, a relationship that provided both comfort and complexity. Jorge understood the demands of the entertainment industry, having worked as a backup dancer for various artists, but their romance played out under the harsh glare of tabloid scrutiny. Paparazzi followed their every move, transforming intimate moments into public spectacle. Dating Christina meant dating her career too, Jorge reflected years later. There was no separating the woman from the phenomenon she had become. Every dinner, every quiet moment was potentially front-page news. Their relationship became a casualty of Christina's ascending career demands. Tours, recording sessions, and promotional appearances consumed every available hour, leaving little room for the quiet intimacy that relationships require. The breakup was painful, but perhaps inevitable, another sacrifice on the altar of stardom. As the new millennium dawned, Christina made a decision that would define the next phase of her career and fundamentally alter her public image. She was tired of being packaged and presented as someone else's vision of what a pop star should be. The result was Stripped, an album that arrived in 2002 like a manifesto written in melody and rage. The transformation was immediate and shocking. Gone were the innocent pastels and carefully coiffed curls. In their place stood a platinum-haired warrior in leather and attitude, her body adorned with tattoos that told stories of pain and triumph. The lead single, Dirty, featuring rapper Redman, was a deliberate middle finger to anyone who thought they could control her artistic expression. Beautiful, the album's most introspective track, revealed the emotional core beneath the provocative exterior. Written during a period of intense personal reflection, the song spoke to anyone who had ever felt inadequate or invisible. I wrote that song for every person who had ever been told they weren't enough, Christina explained to Oprah Winfrey, including myself. The public reaction was swift and polarizing. Conservative critics decried her transformation as a desperate grab for attention, while others praised her for refusing to remain trapped in an artificial persona. Parents who had bought her previous album for their young daughters were suddenly faced with explaining the explicit lyrics and provocative imagery that now defined Christina's brand. She lost her mind, was how one music industry executive, speaking anonymously, described the period. We thought she was committing career suicide. But Christina had calculated the risk and decided authenticity was worth more than commercial safety. The gamble paid off in unexpected ways. Stripped became a critical and commercial success, selling over 12 million copies worldwide and earning Grammy nominations that recognized her growth as both vocalist and songwriter. More importantly, it established Christina as an artist willing to risk everything for the right to define herself. During this period of professional triumph, Christina's personal life was undergoing its own dramatic evolution. She had begun dating music executive Jordan Bratman, a relationship that offered stability amidst the chaos of constant reinvention. Jordan was different from the industry players who typically orbited her world. He was quiet, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely interested in Christina the woman rather than Christina the brand. Jordan saw through all the noise, reflected Linda Perry, the songwriter and producer who worked closely with Christina during this period. He wasn't intimidated by her success or threatened by her independence. That was rare in her world. Their courtship was conducted largely in private, a conscious decision to protect something precious from the destructive glare of public scrutiny. When they married in November 2005 at a lavish ceremony in Napa Valley, it felt like the culmination of Christina's journey towards self-determination. She had fought for control of her music, her image, and now her heart. The arrival of their son Max in 2008 marked another seismic shift in Christina's priorities and perspective. Motherhood, she discovered, was both the most natural and most challenging role she had ever undertaken. The woman who could command stadiums full of screaming fans found herself humbled by the simple complexity of caring for another human being. Having Max changed everything, she told People magazine. Suddenly, all the things that seemed so important before just weren't. The only thing that mattered was being the best mother I could be. But even as Christina embraced domestic life, her professional ambitions remained undiminished. She joined the coaching panel of The Voice in 2011, a role that showcased a different aspect of her personality. Here was Christina the mentor, sharing hard-won wisdom with aspiring singers who reminded her of her own younger self. Her fellow coaches were struck by her dedication to nurturing talent. Christina never phoned it in, remembered Blake Shelton, her longtime co-coach. She would spend hours with her team members, working on technique, sharing stories, giving them the tools they needed to succeed. She understood what it meant to struggle for your art. Yet beneath the surface of professional success and personal fulfillment, cracks were beginning to show. The marriage to Jordan, once a source of stability, was deteriorating under the weight of divergent dreams and incompatible lifestyles. Christina's career demanded constant travel and public engagement, while Jordan preferred the quiet anonymity of private life. They wanted different things, observed a close friend who requested anonymity. Christina needed to be Christina Aguilera, the artist, the performer, the public figure. Jordan needed her to be just Christina, the wife, the mother, the woman next door. Neither was wrong, but they couldn't find a way to reconcile those needs. The divorce, finalized in 2011, was another public dissection of private pain. Tabloids speculated about the reasons, assigning blame and manufacturing drama where there was simply the sad reality of two good people who had grown apart. Christina handled the scrutiny with the grace that comes from years of practice, but friends noted the toll it took on her spirit. In the aftermath of her marriage's end, Christina found solace in the arms of Matthew Rutler, a production assistant she met on the set of her film, Burlesque. Their relationship began quietly, away from the spotlight that had complicated so many of her previous romantic entanglements. Matthew represented something Christina had rarely experienced: unconditional acceptance of every facet of her complex personality. Matthew never tried to change her or manage her, observed Cher, who had become a close friend during the filming of Burlesque. He loved her exactly as she was, which was something Christina had been searching for her entire life. Their daughter Summer Rain was born in 2014, adding another layer of joy and responsibility to Christina's already full life. Watching her navigate single motherhood while maintaining her career inspired admiration, even from industry rivals who had once dismissed her as merely a manufactured pop star. "She's a warrior," Madonna told Vanity Fair in a rare moment of peer recognition. "Everything she's accomplished, every barrier she's broken, she's done while being scrutinized and criticized in ways that would have destroyed lesser artists. That takes extraordinary strength." As Christina entered her 30s, she began to reflect more openly on the journey that had brought her from that terrified little girl in Pennsylvania to one of the most recognizable voices in popular music. The anger that had fueled her early rebellion was transforming into something more complex: wisdom earned through experience, compassion born from struggle, and an unshakable confidence in her own worth. Her 2018 album Liberation represented another evolution in her artistic journey. Gone were the desperate attempts to shock or provoke. In their place was the work of a mature artist who had nothing left to prove except her own truth. The album's title track featured collaborations with artists like Demi Lovato and Keita, showcasing Christina's commitment to lifting up the next generation of female performers. "I'm not competing with anyone anymore," she explained to Rolling Stone. "I'm just trying to make music that matters, that says something real about what it means to be human in this crazy world." The woman who had once needed to scream to be heard had learned the power of speaking softly and carrying a big voice. Her performances during this period were masterclasses in emotional control, each note placed with surgical precision to maximum effect. Critics who had once dismissed her as all technique and no substance were forced to acknowledge the depth of her artistic growth. "Watching Christina perform now is like watching a master painter work," wrote music critic John Pareles in the New York Times. "Every gesture, every vocal inflection, every moment of silence is purposeful. She has become what she always had the potential to be, a true artist." But perhaps the most significant evolution was in Christina's role as an advocate and activist. The woman who had once been criticized for being too focused on her own image began using her platform to address issues that mattered to her: LGBTQ+ rights, domestic violence prevention, and female empowerment in the music industry. "I realized that my voice was bigger than just singing," she told Ellen DeGeneres during a particularly emotional interview. "I had survived things that could have destroyed me, and if my story could help even one person feel less alone, then everything I had been through was worth it." Her advocacy work led to collaborations with organizations like the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, drawing on her own childhood experiences to help others escape situations similar to what her family had endured. Speaking publicly about her father's abuse was perhaps the most courageous thing she had ever done, more terrifying than any high note or career risk. "For years, I was ashamed of what happened in our house," she confided to People magazine. "But I realized that shame was just another prison, and I had spent my whole life breaking out of prisons." As Christina approached her 40th birthday, the industry that had once tried to control and define her began to recognize her as an elder stateswoman of pop music. Younger artists cited her as an influence, particularly her willingness to prioritize artistic integrity over commercial considerations. Taylor Swift, in a rare interview about her influences, noted Christina's impact. "She showed all of us that you could say no, that you could fight back, that you didn't have to accept other people's limitations on who you could be. That was revolutionary." The recognition extended beyond peer approval to institutional acknowledgement. Christina was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2019, a ceremony attended by family, friends, and industry colleagues who had witnessed her evolution from teen sensation to artistic icon. "This isn't just about the music," she said during her acceptance speech, her voice carrying the same power that had first captivated audiences 20 years earlier. "This is about every person who has ever been told they were too much, too loud, too different. You are enough, exactly as you are." Standing there on Hollywood Boulevard, surrounded by the names of entertainment legends, Christina represented something unique in pop culture. An artist who had not only survived the machinery of fame, but had bent it to her will, creating space for authenticity in an industry built on artifice. The pandemic of 2020 brought unexpected opportunities for reflection and reconnection. Like artists everywhere, Christina found herself grounded, separated from the stages and studios that had defined her existence for decades. Instead of viewing this as a setback, she embraced it as a chance to rediscover the simple joy of making music without commercial pressure or public expectation. Her home studio became a laboratory for experimentation, a place where she could explore musical ideas without the weight of industry expectations. The result was some of her most personal and vulnerable work, songs that captured the collective experience of isolation and uncertainty that defined those surreal months. "In some ways, the pandemic gave me back my voice," she reflected during a virtual interview with Rolling Stone. Not the technical ability to sing, but the freedom to remember why I started singing in the first place. It was never about fame or money or charts. It was about connection, about making people feel something. As the world slowly reopened, Christina emerged with a renewed sense of purpose and a clearer vision of what the next chapter of her career would look like. She began working on what she described as her most personal album yet, a collection of songs that would serve as both autobiography and love letter to the art form that had saved her life. "I want to tell the whole story," she explained to longtime collaborator Linda Perry. "Not just the pretty parts or the dramatic parts, but the real story of what it means to grow up in public, to make mistakes, to find your way back to yourself." The album, tentatively titled Aguilera, was scheduled for release in late 2023, marking the 25th anniversary of her professional recording career. Early reports from the studio described it as her most cohesive and emotionally resonant work, featuring collaborations with artists spanning generations and genres. But beyond the music itself, Christina's story represents something larger about the nature of celebrity, authenticity, and artistic evolution in the digital age. She had navigated the transition from traditional media gatekeepers to social media democracy, learning to communicate directly with fans while maintaining the mystery that makes artistry compelling. She's one of the few artists from her generation who truly understands both the power and the responsibility that comes with her platform, observed music journalist Jarek Kennedy. She's not trying to stay relevant by chasing trends. She's creating relevance by staying true to who she is. As this documentary draws to a close, we find Christina exactly where she began, in front of a microphone, her voice soaring through octaves that still seem to defy human limits. But now, that voice carries the weight of experience, the texture of triumph and heartbreak, the wisdom that comes from surviving everything the world can throw at you and emerging not just intact, but transformed. The little girl who once sang herself to sleep to drown out the sounds of violence has become a woman whose voice brings comfort to millions. The teenager who was told to smile and sing pretty has become an artist who refuses to compromise her truth for anyone's comfort. The young woman who was criticized for being too much has become a role model for anyone who has ever been told to make themselves smaller. In the end, Christina Aguilera's story is not just about music or fame or the peculiar alchemy that transforms raw talent into cultural significance. It is about the fundamental human right to define yourself, to grow beyond the circumstances of your birth, to refuse the limitations others would place upon your dreams. Her voice, that impossible instrument that first brought her to our attention, remains as powerful as ever. But now we understand that its true strength was never in the notes it could reach, but in the truths it was brave enough to tell. In a world that often seems designed to silence the authentic self, Christina Aguilera stands as proof that some voices are simply too powerful to be contained, too true to be ignored, and too important to be forgotten. The spotlight fades, but the voice lingers, echoing in the hearts of everyone who has ever needed permission to be exactly who they are. In giving herself that permission, Christina Aguilera gave it to all of us, and that, perhaps, is the greatest gift any artist can offer the world.